So last weekend, Season 1 of Solo Leveling won Crunchyroll's Anime of the Year. This is over shows like Dandadan, Dungeon Meshi, Apothecary Diaries, and Frieren Beyond Journey's End. This has generally been received very poorly online.
Solo Leveling!
Oh my gosh! No way! No way!
The clear favorite, which is no stranger to this channel's audience, was Frieren. So obviously I'm not an impartial judge, given the fact that I've talked about Frieren abundantly across the last year. But despite what you'd expect, I think this is more complicated than just a steal. Who should have won Anime of the Year? Did anyone really deserve it? And why do I find these questions so interesting? My name is Pei, and today we're talking about the complicated nature of any award. So the first question I had when thinking about this is, what's the point of an award show? Why do they exist? I mean, the first obvious answer is recognition. Art means a lot to a lot of different people, and movies and animation are really hard to make, so some sort of official acknowledgement of a piece of media's impact makes sense. However, I can't think of a single award show that hasn't been part of some sort of controversy, criticized for snubbing media that obviously should have won. Because essentially any attempt to take an objective look at something as subjective as art often leads to debate. I think it's good to try to look at art objectively. I think it helps people understand and appreciate things that are beautiful. But the way art impacts us is deeply individual. Something that moves us to tears might seem lackluster to another person. And everyone's a critic, quick to argue that the show that they loved deserved an award more than another. Yet despite this, if you were to take millions of people and ask them their favorite anime, their top 10 list, you would see certain names pop up over and over again. General statistics are far from universal or foolproof, but they are one of the few things that really is objective in media. If we had access to full behind-the-scenes analytics, there'd be no debating what the most popular show is. And we have pretty good indicators of that anyways. Which leads to a common issue, especially with award shows, the lack of parameters. What should be factored in when we're looking at Anime of the Year? How important are things like impact on the industry or raw numbers? Is it just meant to measure quality? One of the tricky parts about award shows that I think leads to such controversy is they're not given much room for explanation. I constantly make big statements about anime on my channel, but it's paired with reasons, so anyone watching my video will have the opportunity to see the evidence and argument I'm making and determine whether or not they value my opinion. Does my statement feel substantiated, supported? So this is where the core of this video comes into play. I think Frieren should have won over Solo Leveling. Ooh, what a hot take. But I think that's very dependent on what my idea of Anime of the Year should be. Because with different parameters, maybe Solo Leveling deserved to win. And I'm going to be making that argument too. So let's start there. Why Solo Leveling might be the Anime of the Year. So what if Anime of the Year has to do with the show that has the most immediate, directly correlated impact? Not lasting power or influence, but the show that had the most effect on the industry as a whole. I feel like anime is becoming way more popular. And I don't just mean the graphs and statistics that we see online that argue that point, but specifically in my life, I'm interacting with more and more people who know and talk about anime. I think I have a much easier time explaining what I do professionally to people than Gigguk did 10 or 12 years ago. If people don't watch anime, they've heard of it. Hell, even a lot of the people who say they don't watch anime have actually seen a couple shows. I feel like anime is broken into the Western zeitgeist. It is largely adopted, known, and consumed. And pretty consistently at the forefront of that is what I would call starter anime. I think it's fascinating how many people wouldn't define themselves as someone who watches anime even when they've seen a couple shows or hundreds of episodes. It's a pretty possessive community for many reasons, one of which obviously is that anime for a long time was counterculture. It wasn't cool and it wasn't very widely accepted. So a lot of people who watched anime were mistreated or excluded from other groups because of it, and I think it makes a lot of sense that those people who were mistreated in the past wouldn't want those same people coming into anime and kind of usurping the culture. But in reality, the thing that determines whether or not someone watches anime is if they watch anime. There's nothing to be gatekept. There is no possession. My exposure to anime started with Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, and Ghibli. But I didn't really consider myself someone that watched anime until a couple popular shonens caught me. The shows that really bridged that gap for me were Sword Art Online, Attack on Titan, My Hero Academia. They were approachable, action-packed, and more than anything, entertaining. It feels like this genre of shonen has been around forever, and anytime there's a vacuum, it doesn't take long for another shonen to come along and fill that space. These shows tend to be viewed through an incredibly nostalgic lens. They're often pedestalized by people who watch them at the right time. And while some are great, a lot of them are very mediocre. prioritizing entertainment over everything. So many have cookie-cutter bland protagonists so people can just insert themselves into the story. They're often fine shows, some are even pretty good, but only a select few are outstanding. The reason this ties into Solo Leveling is because this show is filling that void. It was this year's action-packed, easy-to-consume, entertaining shonen, and if I'm being honest, I think it did that job very well. Solo Leveling and a lot of these shows in the past have made approaching anime easier, and it's shocking how often now I make conversation with people who I would never expect to like or watch anime, who don't just enjoy it, but love it. Take for example this guy I play basketball with. He's a popular Apex Legends streamer and commentator named Nicewig. We've had multiple conversations about anime, and a good portion of those were talking about Solo Leveling. He regularly tweets about the show, and I see friends that I didn't know watch anime responding. And even earlier this year, he had an opportunity to go into a professional studio, collaborate with Crunchyroll, and try replacing some of the lines in Solo Leveling. My point is that this show is big and popular and impactful. It might have individually had more impact on anime as an industry this year than any other show. And maybe that means if the parameters were based off of impact and popularity, that Solo Leveling should be Anime of the Year. But what if it's for the best? The 2025 nominees for Anime of the Year felt really stacked. If I were one of the panelists, I honestly would have put 4 of the shows above Solo Leveling, but I do think that every nominee this year had a pretty good case. I've either talked about or plan to talk about every single one of these besides Kaiju number 8. Not only do I like talking and thinking about these shows, but there's an audience for it on YouTube. There's a widespread, passionate fan base for all of them. But there's one show with a big accolade that others and I have brought up time and time again. Frieren was the first show to lastingly usurp Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood on my anime list, solidifying itself on a public review forum as the #1 rated anime by a very substantial margin. This show is critically acclaimed and widely popular, one that feels like it has a remarkable staying power in the sphere. And not only that, but a lot of the things that I argued about Solo Leveling winning the award I think also apply to Frieren. It's a show swinging outside of anime's scope. It's hyper popular. It's approachable and absolutely can function as a starter anime. It's a show that's already getting a lot of people interested in this medium. It's having a huge impact on the industry. But despite that, Solo Leveling was more popular. Maybe in the spirit of giving people their flowers where it's deserved, popularity should have its own category. Or maybe it should even be factored into things like Anime of the Year. But popularity is one of the easiest things to understand when it comes to anime. The information's all there. Should award shows be popularity contests? I think most people would argue against it because it's already such an apparent statistic. Some probably disagree with this, but I do think it should be factored in, behind quality. But Crunchyroll is an award show with a 70% audience vote, which means popularity is important and recency bias is absolutely a thing. A lot of people online have pointed out that a majority of voters might not have even realized that they were voting for Season 1, not 2 of Solo Leveling. That has a widespread effect. So with awards, what's the solution? Taking away the audience portion? Personally, I think the best award shows have predominantly panelist input. And in that system, there's still room for an award where there's a fan vote. But I believe a well-founded panel is more in touch with general sentiment surrounding quality in storytelling. The problem is, as soon as the panel gets bad, which inevitably happens with any long-running award show, it becomes even more out of touch than what we're seeing now. I've found that a lot of awards fall flat. There are rarely results that everyone is satisfied with, and in the pursuit of legitimacy, sometimes there's this kind of air of superiority. I didn't find myself very bothered by Solo Leveling winning, because I think I kind of already dropped my expectations. Award shows are incredibly tricky to navigate, and I don't really need the Crunchyroll awards to validate my opinions on Solo Leveling or Frieren, because art isn't a zero-sum game. You can have an incredibly competitive year where so many shows lose that were better than anything we've seen in the past because there was something better. And the people winning the most in this situation are the viewer. Anime is growing, so many great shows are airing, and I just feel like that's something that's important to remember in all this drama. Outside of an excuse to talk about great shows, who cares about the Anime Awards? Because independent of any accolades or recognition, if a show hits for you, that's all that matters. Thanks for watching, and a quick outro. After over a year of doing weekly releases, I'm taking a week off. It's a much needed break and vacation, and if you haven't gotten a chance, go watch last week's video. I'm really proud of it, and for some reason it flopped pretty hard. Thanks again. I'll see y'all in 2 weeks.